Here we go.
All right.
And I want to get rid of these. Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of our video on the side so we could see the entire presentation. Paul, do you know how to get rid of the video, or just it's okay to leave it there, correct?
You should be able to go to the top where it says view. And there's some options up there, but I don't think it matters. I can see it. Can everybody see the screen okay? Thumbs up.
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
It's
okay.
fine.
let's go
Okay.
ahead and get started.
Okay.
Leanne, you want to introduce?
Yeah, so Leanne Lamoli, I'm your client rep for the Diocese of Connecticut. And obviously we're new with the Diocese of Connecticut of just over a year that you've been with us. And part of the excitement of that is you all have your own individual policies. So you're policy specific for each of the individual church needs. So me being your client rep, I'll just give you a little bit of background on myself. So I've been with Church Insurance. This is my 20th year with the claims and an underwriting background. And you know, we're here to serve you, and I'll let Paul introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Leanne. Hi, everybody. My name's Paul Stevens. I am the Vice President and Field Manager of Church Insurance Agency Corporation. So I work in support of Leanne and some other folks. I've been with Church Insurance for 23 years. I've been in the industry 35 years. What I would say about Church Insurance, we're happy that you're back. I know it's been a few decades since y'all were in the program. We're happy to have you back. We're going to do a couple things today to overview Church Insurance and how that intersects with you. And then we'll open it up to questions. Very informal folks here. So anytime you have a question, if you want to let us know, put it in the chat, whatnot, we can answer. We'll also save a little time at the end for some back and forth dialogue. So if there's no further no questions right now, we'll go ahead and start. Leanne, you can advance us to the next screen. Okay. So today, here's what we plan to do. We're going to discuss 3 topics. We're going to discuss church insurance companies, give you a brief history of it, what it is, how long it's been around, what our specialty is. Then Leanne will take over and do a deeper dive in terms of property and casualty coverage, which is included in the package policies that you folks have purchased from Church Insurance. And then she'll hand back off to me and we'll do a brief review of property and casualty claims just to kind of level set where we are as of our last calendar year, what type of claims we're seeing and what that impact is. So we'll go to the next slide.
Next slide.
And one more. All right. So church insurance companies, it's 95 years ago, almost, in another month we'll be 95 years old. This is a picture of the New York Times from the day that they incorporated. And it's an interesting piece. Obviously being part of the Episcopal Church, we're big on our archives, and we found this piece out there. What I think's most interesting about it, they highlighted in the sheet. It's with the reason they set it up. And first thing to think about, it's set up as a fire company, fire insurance. And why is that? Well, liability really wasn't a thing yet in 1929. Things were all property related. The building either existed or it burnt down or it blew away, and they needed coverage for the property risk. Liability, we didn't, just to kind of forward, we didn't get into the liability business till the early 60s. So the insurance business for property and casualty was largely a property situation, largely fire insurance. And what these folks thought about at the time, which was really forward thinking, was that, hey, churches do not have the moral hazard that normal businesses have. Fancy way of saying churches don't typically burn their own buildings down. Okay. So they started the church insurance company May 23rd, 1929 is the article. And the whole goal of it was because there's no moral hazard, the premium should be less. And that's what they focused on in 1929. We still focus on that today. We'll go to the next slide. So just a brief history. Like I said, it was founded in 1929 as a fire company. The first board was composed of prominent Episcopalians. You'll recognize a couple of the names, J.P. Morgan, interweaved in our history as well as in our parents' history of the church pension group. And to actually get the thing off the ground, they all put up their own money, which, it's an interesting concept. At the time, I always looked into that. What was that money? And at the time in 1929, now put it in perspective, stock market's getting ready to crash. They don't know it yet. They ponied up a total of $300,000, equivalent of about 5 million today. So that's how it started. And again, our beautiful work in the archives, they found this old document with the board of directors, which was a few years later. And you can kind of see who these folks were. A lot of them were prominent Episcopalians. Many had been captains of industry or high-ranking government officials. We'll go to the next slide. So what's that mean today? Here we are 95 years later. We're still moving. We're still ensuring the Episcopal Church, still living up to our mission of supporting the church pension group and their mission of supporting you folks to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. We do it through the business of the church, meaning the property and liability. It's really kind of, when you think about a church, you really don't think about this stuff until you do, until the fire or until the liability claim comes in. So let's talk about us today. We're called the Church Insurance Company of Vermont. And that company, we started that in the late 90s. So J.P. Morgan and company did a great job setting this thing up, very forward thinking. The one flaw, in my opinion, was they domiciled in New York City. So what do we know about New York City? It's expensive. It's a lot of regulation up there. So the state of Vermont in the 80s started to move they wanted to be the captive insurance capital of America. What's a captive insurance company? It's a fancy way of saying self-insurance. So, if you're a McDonald's restaurant, you don't go out and call State Farm and say, insure my restaurant. You call the McDonald's captive insurance company that all they do is insure McDonald's restaurants. And that's what this is. So this is the Episcopal Church doing that. So we moved the operation to Vermont, Bennington, Vermont, for anybody that knows the area, right up on the state line, kind of across from Troy, New York, Albany, New York, and all that. Why Vermont? Touched on a little bit of it. It's a tactic. We're a nonprofit, all right. So by being in Vermont, on top of being a nonprofit, we also save about 3.5% overall on a premium base of $110 million. It's significant savings just by being domiciled in the state of Vermont. It's also very flexible and helps to reduce our costs. What do I mean by flexible? If you're an admitted carrier, which, even today, half of the carriers out there are what we call admitted carriers. They'll take on anybody that they want to underwrite. They don't have an affinity for one group over another. So if you want to think about, Progressive, Geico, folks like that, they just have a model of the type of insured they want, but they don't have to be a certain affinity. So with us, when you're an admitted carrier, if you want to change the coverage in 50 states, you have to reach out to 50 different states and get approval from 50 different states. You pay each one of them as you go, and some of them will never approve it. So what ends up happening in the real world is a company wants to increase the coverage for, business interruption for all their customers. So they go out to all 50 states and say, we want to do this. 35 of them, after several years, will say, okay. And, they're paying the whole way, trying to get this through. 15 will say no. So then they've got a variance between what their product is for different people. That was a problem for church insurance up until we moved to Vermont. Vermont's a great state to do business in from insurance model because the captive allows us to be what we call one and done, meaning if it's approved in Vermont, it's automatically approved in all 50 states. And we only have to deal with Vermont. The other thing, waiting 5 or 6 years for a simple policy change in all the states. In Vermont, we've been able to get things approved same day, same week, never goes longer than a month. And generally, like I said, most of my experience with Vermont has been same day, same week. We don't generally ask for things that are, we're always generally looking to enhance the coverage, which makes it easier. It's not like we're asking the state, hey, we want to strip coverage, which would probably take a little longer. But Vermont gives you a lot of flexibility. Because of that, we're not having to pay everybody in the country, saves us some money, so we can pass that along in savings. So what does that result in? Today, 95 years into this, we insure over 90% of all Episcopal dioceses. We actually insure 97 of the 101. We insure over 90% of all Episcopal churches in the US today. Connecticut was one of the big areas that wasn't in the program. So we've always very happy to have you back. Leanne's been, chasing you folks for many decades. And so happy to have you back along with everybody else in Province 1, who, the rest of Province 1 we've served for a long time, but Connecticut was out there on your own program, as you know. And so we're just happy to have you back. And now you're in the program that over 9 out of 10 Episcopal churches are in, and it's actually closer to about 95% at this point. So that's Church Insurance Company of Vermont. If you want to think about it as 2 buckets, the church insurance company, that's the underwriting. That's the people that issue the policy, send out the bill. When you have a claim, it comes out of the Vermont office, although we do have people all over the country to serve. Church insurance agency is the second bucket. That's Leanne and myself. We're the licensed agents. We're able to transact business in all the states. We are able to transact business that is not necessarily church insurance. So, for example, workers' comp, auto insurance, foreign travel, cyber liability, malicious attack coverage. We can place all that for you, and we do. So 2 companies that are serving you, it's the Church Insurance Agency Corporation. Think of that as the agent. That's Leanne. The Church Insurance Company of Vermont, that's the underwriter up in Bennington, Vermont. Objective, beautiful thing. It hasn't changed. I've been here 23 years. It hasn't changed. For the last 95 years, it hasn't changed. And our objective is to provide broad property and casualty coverage in a financially sustainable way. The first part of that's easy to understand. The second part, we need to all understand what that means. Financially sustainable way for you, the church, and for the company. So if the company's not financially sustainable, well, then obviously it won't be around to serve the church very long. And vice versa, if it's not financially sustainable in terms of the church can't afford the premium, then obviously we have no one to insure. So we'll go to the next slide. And we'll hand it over to Leanne, who can do a drill down into the actual product that we do provide to you folks. And go ahead, Leanne.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Paul, for all of that. Great information. So as Paul said, we have a mission here at Church Insurance, and that mission being that we are focused on providing the Episcopal Church with broad, cost-effective property and casualty coverage. With a unique risk management strategy and tools in a financially sustainable way. So our church-specific insurance services are casualty, property, and other insurance products, which I'm going to kind of just dip into very briefly for our unique risk management strategies to keep us in a financially sustainable way. So with that, I will start with, what are our coverages? First, obviously, is the property coverage. So our property coverage ensures your building contents and equipment breakdown at replacement cost. We also have built into the coverage a margin clause. It's a 15% margin clause. So what is a margin clause? So that means we cover up to 115% of the stated building limits that you have on a per building basis. So what this additional margin clause coverage does is it reduces the possibility that your physical facility or contents are underinsured for any type of a covered loss. We're on a special risk program, so it's direct physical loss subject to exclusions. And then that, kind of leaks into the boiler and equipment breakdown coverage. That's also part of the property coverage, which provides protection for the repair or replacement of mechanical equipment. That includes your boilers, your AC units, refrigeration equipment. It even includes your alarm systems, electrical panels, anything like that. That's the mechanics of the church. So then we, dip into your liability coverage. And what is your liability coverage? It protects your insurance from third-party claims for bodily injury, associated medical costs, damage to someone else's property. In addition, it extends to provide a much-needed sexual misconduct coverage, which is critical for religious institutions. We also provide a non-owned auto liability coverage within the general liability forms. This coverage is dedicated per participant. It's not a shared policy, shared coverage. So did I accidentally switch to the next screen? I did. Sorry about that. I hit the button. So we also offer directors and officers coverage. And obviously this is for protects the organization and the people against civil liability or wrongful acts. And these include allegations of fraud, fiduciary misconduct, and other serious wrongdoings. Donors, employees, vendors, and even the government can bring legal action against the nonprofit organization and its board of directors. So it's a really good, obviously to have for, the vestry and such. So also under the directors and officers coverage is the employment practices insurance, which protects the organization against claims made by employers, former employers, potential employers, including discrimination, wrongful termination, sexual harassment, other employment-related allegations. It covers your institution, including its directors and officers. We can move to your excess liability, which is also considered umbrella. We call it umbrella. So that protects your organization against catastrophic civil liability and provides an additional layer of protection in the event that the other policies can't cover the loss. Our standard policy limit with all of our policies is $1 million. You can request a higher limit. There's next increment is 4 million, and then it goes up to 10 million. So that's available at an additional charge. Cyber liability. So the cyber liability provides both first and third party insurance coverage against cyber losses. The first party coverage insures losses for the policyholder's own data or lost income resulting from a data breach or a cyber attack. The third-party coverage insures for liability of the policyholder to third parties, including clients and governmental entities that arise out of a data breach or a cyber attack. Next would be our assailant coverage. So
Question
this
on cyber.
provides, I'm sorry?
I had a question on cyber.
Sure.
Okay. So it just to nail that down, the example would be if someone hacked into our bookkeeping or our church management and got personally a PII out of there and then
Yep.
used it for some purpose, that would be a case of a third party could bring suit against us. Is that, am I
Correct.
understanding that? Okay, cool. Thanks.
Correct. Yes.
If we can stop a second on cyber, I had a question. I think you offered recently some additional coverage on cyber.
Yes.
Unfortunately, probably most people, and I didn't either, even though I know something about insurance, really had a hard time assessing whether or not that was needed or not. And because he didn't give a recommendation, which I should try to point out, saying maybe you can't, but it would be useful because we're dealing a lot of people who, I mean, the people who are making these decisions know nothing about insurance largely. But on cyber, I assumed that I didn't see much either liability or first party injury in that for church, because we don't keep much confidential information, obviously, except on our employees. And and we're not going to likely to lose much if somebody hacks in, because it's not, even if they destroyed something, they wouldn't be destroying very much. I didn't opt for, or ask our vestry to opt for any more coverage, but it was a little hard to know what to do in that situation, frankly, given the fact this is pretty obscure for most churches.
This is a great conversation, and this is also a little opportunity for me to suggest that if you haven't already done so, set up a time with Leanne to do a Zoom or come out and meet with the vestry, review coverage. This question on cyber, Brian, great point. Bill, great point. Here's the thing you should think about with cyber. The biggest risk the church has, and the claim we see over and over and over again, and not just us, the industry sees it, to the degree that the coverage has been reduced in the industry. And some carriers have excluded the coverage, and it's baked into cyber, and what it's called is cyber crime. Okay. So we know what a breach is. Okay. I gave away all the data, or someone broke in and took the data, first party, third party. The cyber crime piece is what you would consider fraudulent instruction. So I'll walk you through the typical claim we see.
We had one. So we had a loss a couple of years ago. I wasn't the treasurer at the time, so I didn't put a claim in for it. It wasn't big. It was only, in the hundreds of dollars range. But yeah, we had one.
So the biggest one we had was $280,000. Now here's the rub. If you look at the cyber policy, and ours is richer than most, and I'll give you a little juxtapost. The biggest church carrier out there is called Church Mutual. They totally exclude fraudulent instruction for good reason. It's largely uninsurable because people keep clicking the link and keep, sending the money off somewhere where it shouldn't go. But if you look at our policy for the cyber crime piece, it's only providing 100,000. All right. So I just told you we had one that went to 280. So we wrote a check for 100,000 and they were on the other 180. They were surprised, they understood after we explained it to them and showed them what's happened in the industry. The excess cyber, the best thing about that is two things. It's $700 a year, if I remember right, Leanne. Is that correct still?
Correct. I think it's $750.
Okay. And what it does is, it increases all your coverage for cyber, but the main one you're looking at, Brian, is it increases the cyber crime from 100,000 to $1 million. Is that correct, Leanne?
The cyber crime?
Yeah, it takes the crime piece. It takes it from 100,000.
Crime piece from 25,000. It's 25 to 100. Correct.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
So what's the deductible
even worse? So right now, Brian, you got 25,000 for fraud. Somebody falls for a fraudulent instruction. The most that we can bear, that a reinsurer or carrier will bear, that we found, is 25,000. If you buy the excess, you can get another 75, gets you to 100. Now, obviously, the key to this is training, making sure people do not click on links like that. These people get very sophisticated at how they do it. They'll spoof the email. They'll, I'll just give you an example. I don't want to dominate the time here, but it's an important point. In the big claim we had, what happened was they say, hey, it's somebody that this organization is used to sending them a big check every year for funding. A couple months before the time, they get a note saying, hey, we changed our banking account. Here's our new routing information. And they change it. So now it's time to fund, and they send it off into the black hole of outer space, and it isn't the folks, right? How could they have prevented it? It's pretty easy. The telephone. Pick up the phone. Call the person that sent you the request. Is this you? Don't call the number on the spoof email because it won't be them either. Call the known number. So there's easy risk management that we just don't think of. And a lot of what happened in this one, Brian and Bill, is the person who fell for it was used to doing this every year. I send $280,000 every year to this organization. They change their bank. No big deal. Didn't think about it. That's how they got it. So sorry to spend so much time on it, but an important point that y'all made.
Yeah, we had, by the way, two things quickly. I just to say we had to change the bank come up for someone if for an employee changed their bank, a little more modest kind of claim. But the only question I have is what's the deductible on the cyber coverage?
It's
10,
5,000.
It's 5.
Oh, it is 5,000. Okay, so our we had our loss was only like I think $800. The deductible actually was only I think about 500. And technically we had a claim, although nobody put it in, but it wasn't a big thing. It was our loss was to a gift card at
Oh,
Christmas
yeah.
time.
I've seen it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen that one.
Clergy email, please send
Yep.
me gift cards so I can give it to whoever.
Don't tell anyone. I'll talk to you about it later, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, we see it.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Leanne. Oh, one other point. The top 5 items that Leanne covered, property, liability, D&O, EPL, and umbrella, those items are directly included in your package policy insured with Church Insurance Company of Vermont. The bottom 5 are not Church Insurance Company of Vermont. Legally, we can't. We can only do what we can do. So things like cyber, workers' comp, the auto, international travel, we use A-rated or better product partners that we've used for years. So Leanne, if you want to pick up with those auxiliaries.
Yeah, so the auxiliaries, the next one was actually active assailant coverage. So obviously not a great subject, but provides coverage for an event that involves the use of a weapon by an assailant. So it's intended to harm another person or a group of persons, carried out or attempted by a person or group of persons acting alone or on behalf of or in connection with an organization. This would result in a bodily injury or any person or physical loss or damage to destruction of tangible property. So, it's there. Hopefully that never has to be used. I think we've used it once, maybe.
Yeah,
probably
unfortunately, I used to be able to say, and we've never had to use this policy, but it's great sleep at night protection. Till about 2 years ago, Birmingham, Alabama, I got a call, and we had was a potluck dinner. There were 18 people in the room. Average age was probably 75. A gentleman showed up who had come to church a couple times. He wasn't really a member, but they knew him. They'd seen him, and he was local. And he sat down by himself, and some of the ladies asked him, hey, would you like to sit with us? And he said no. And then about a half hour went by, and they noticed he was drinking. He had a little flask with him. So they started getting worried that he was drinking and not eating. So they went over and they asked him, hey, would you like us to make you a plate of food? And he said, no, I'm fine. And then they left him alone. And 5 minutes later, he stood up and opened fire. So I had 3 fatalities, women in their 80s, trying to have a potluck. Okay, so I don't say it to scare you. I just say it that it happened. And we've had other things that didn't get that bad, but were kind of close, where people are trying to, driving by, throwing a Molotov cocktail at a group of people, things like that. So this is set up to respond. And what active assailant coverage did in that Alabama case was it avoided the lawsuit. So, you know, the way you would deal with this, if you've got, if you're the family of these victims, your only real recourse without active assailant coverage would be to sue the church. And then the church insurance policy, liability policy would respond. That never happened because we had the active assailant product. What that did was it provided counseling coverage for these people who survived it. It provided public relations coverage for the church to help rebrand themselves because people are afraid of it. It helped them with increased security. But by and large, the biggest benefit to it was the counseling coverage, because if you take care of people at the time of loss, generally you're not going to get sued, or not to the extent that you might. So that was, if there's anything I would say that positively came out of that, was we got to see the policy respond, and it responded as designed. Bill, you had a question.
It has to do with this whole slide, so it's really only relevant when Leanne's done going through each of the topics.
Okay.
But I'll put it there just so you can ponder it. It's maybe a basic question. You mentioned in one of your overviews that the actual policies in play vary from maybe diocese to diocese, certainly not parish to parish, I wouldn't expect. Or is it, but I'm wondering, of these coverage types, are these all sort of included in what the Diocese of Connecticut is
Great
providing?
question. Great
Okay.
question. So the top 5 things you see: property, liability, D&O, EPL, and umbrella. Every policy we issue has it.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's uniformity of coverage, so that a bishop knows that every church has some level of coverage, and we
Good.
set those. Now you can buy more, but they're set at a certain limit. Cyber, active assailant, if you're insured with us through the company, you automatically get that coverage as well. It's not through the company, it's provided through Lloyd's of London,
Right.
places like that. You don't pay for it. It's a perk of you being in the program. International travel, if you have groups leaving the country, you call us and you get a rate for that. So
Yeah.
some people use it, most people don't. Most people aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Commercial auto, most churches don't own a vehicle, but if they do, Leanne can hook them up with Great American Insurance and get them a good rate. And workers' comp, most churches are with us for workers' comp. But Leanne, in Connecticut, are they all with us, or how's that
Yes,
set up?
they are
Workers' comp?
now. Yes, yes.
Okay.
So 8 of the 10. So Bill, for you, 8 of the 10 things on the slide, everyone has in
Beautiful.
Connecticut. The
Yep.
2 that are kind of a la carte are international travel and commercial auto.
That's a great answer to my great question. Thank you, Paul.
It was a great question. Thanks, Bill. Go ahead, Leanne.
Okay, so there's a few more left. Workers' comp, which protects your organization against common law liability for workplace injuries. It's state mandated benefits for injured workers, so it's guided by Connecticut. Commercial auto, as Paul mentioned, most churches don't have a church-owned auto, but we do provide protection for the organization if it was needed from the ownership, maintenance, or use of covered autos. And international travel, which is protection if you're going on a trip through international travel exposures, from emergency medical expenses to accidental death. The premium is based on the number of people going times the number of days, and we cover up to 30 days if necessary. So those are all of our coverages. And if there are any more questions before we move on to the next topic, Paul and I can answer.
I've got one more small statement to make. I want to say, I think this is a good time to say it. My bookkeeper and I found $5,500 in our budget for 2024 that we've discovered we would not need to pay. We had it in a category of professional liability, and we hadn't been getting billed for it. So we said, I wonder if this is included in our new stuff from CIAC. And we called our representative and got an answer straight away. And it's good news for the vestry when I meet with them next. So I'm happy as a treasurer.
That's great to hear.
And it was a very clean transaction, and I got it immediately on the phone, and I mean, I'll call you guys whenever I have a question at this point, so thank you.
Yeah, we have a great customer service rep call center. And what's great about it is you can call, you can get your rep. And if they're not available and you want to move on to the next available, they're kind of all in each other, able to, Paul's ahead of that whole group. So he could probably give you like a little bit more extensive explanation of how, but how everybody works. They all work together.
Yeah,
It's
what we like about it is you're assigned a rep. And if that rep isn't on the phone already, you'll get to that rep, and we measure how long the ring time is. We measure everything. It's a call center. If they are on the phone, it'll give you the option to leave them a message. I only want to talk to Leanne, or no, I'll talk to whoever. This is a quick question, and you'll get the next available rep. So they're an amazing group of people. When I started out in this business 35 years ago, I started on the phone, and it's a rough job. Many nights you go home hoarse with no voice left. All right. And it's and it's nonstop with that thing in your ear. So I have nothing but the most respect for them, because if you really think about, most of the business we do is through that call center. Leanne and I get called out when it's deeper, maybe let's come meet face to face or do a Zoom. Let's do a deep dive. But those folks handle a good majority of our day-to-day transactions. And Bill,
I always said customer service rep's the hardest job in the
it is.
insurance company.
It is. And Bill, to your point, I was glad to hear that you found that $5,500, because it lives up to our mission. Part of our mission is to free up that money so that you can use it for ministry, other things than paying insurance premiums. So I'm sure the $5,500 will get used in ways that are very useful to people and to the church. Let's go to risk management then, Leanne.
Yes, risk management. So we provide many risk management services, and we do on-site visits, walkthroughs of the property. Oh, let me switch the slide. Sorry about that.
No worries.
On-site visits, we'll walk through the property. We have the Episcopal Safety Program is the risk management walkthroughs. We have Safe Church Online, which I'm sure everybody is aware of. And then we have comprehensive renewal reviews that your client service rep does about a third of the book every year. So, we take a hands-on approach to our risk management in an effort to protect your organization's assets, and by educating our policyholders, identifying vulnerabilities, and taking any necessary steps to minimize financial consequences, we can help ensure that your people, property, and finances are properly protected.
And if I could plug in a plug for Leanne, the Episcopal Safety Program, where she'll come out and walk through the buildings with you, go through your whole operation, spend a couple hours with you, and provide you with a written report of recommendations of how you can improve the risk. I can't say enough about it. A lot of this stuff, risk management is a big concept, and you hear people talk about it a lot, but it doesn't have to be complex. It really is kind of just new, fresh eyes. Where's the low-hanging fruit? What are the serious risks? And I'll say it like this. The biggest claim I ever saw for property was a $42 million fire loss caused by a $2 extension cord. So wrap your head around that we would have seen that extension cord. We would have said, this was way before our time, me and Leanne, but we would have said, wait, you shouldn't have 8 things plugged into that extension cord that you bought at Walgreens. You should have an electrician put a wire here with an outlet and a GFI, and it would have prevented that loss. Why is it important? It doesn't matter to the church, does it? I mean, the premium, the company paid it. It matters because it comes out of premium. So premiums go up because of bad luck like that. So anything we can do to reduce or avoid a loss is very significant for you and us in terms of financial sustainability. So if you haven't done so already, and if Leanne hasn't already reached out to you, I know she will. I can't recommend more spending that hour or two letting her walk through with you and give you some recommendations. Generally, what we find is things look pretty good. Have you thought about this or that? Every once in a while, we find stuff that's super, life safety stuff, and we'll bring that to your attention. So that's my plug for risk management.
I'm going to do that
Yeah.
after this presentation. One question though on the size of the claim that you mentioned. I've not really looked at the extent of the what's in that maximum insurance amount, but you don't have replacement coverage, I assume. I mean, the cost of rebuilding it, putting up a new church like our 1895 building would be, which, by the way, I happen to see the contract. I was looking through old records. It cost in 1895. It cost $26,000. I think it's going to cost a little more than that now. But can a church actually afford to, after a fire, rebuild? It's going to be enough coverage to rebuild the church?
Yeah, so great question, Brian. And the policy does provide replacement cost. Now, replacement cost means like kind quality, new for old. So in the real world, they would come out and they'd say, okay, it had a slate roof. We're going to give you this new kind of roof, and you wouldn't be very happy. But as the Episcopal denominational plan, the claim I'm giving you was St. John the Divine up in New York City. So the 42 million, they wanted everything to be exactly the way they wanted us to go open the quarry where they got the stone. Now the policy provided replacement costs. So to the extent that we could, look, I'll give you an example. Had a tornado in Jackson, Tennessee. It took a Tiffany window and made it 1 million pieces. We hired the preeminent stained glass expert in the country, the guy who did the U.S. Capitol ceiling, to go put that thing back together. He was able to use about 60% of the original glass, 40% he had to fabricate. It took about a year. They reinstalled it. We're standing there looking at it. All the church folks are so happy. We got our Tiffany back. He hit me with his elbow and he goes, it's a Feminella. That's his last name. And his point is Tiffany's dead. Okay, so you're not going to get the 100% Tiffany window back, but what you got was something that the client said, this looks exactly like it. And it does. Now the other point you make, Brian, is the reason there was $42 million to cover St. John the Divine was because we had the replacement cost at north of 100 million. So insuring things at the right limit is very important. We will not underinsure people. We will let people leave the program and go somewhere else because of the reputational risk and the ultimately real risk to the diocese of an underinsured property claim. So one thing that Leanne's probably talked to you all about is that we appraise our buildings every few years just to keep up with it so that if the worst case scenario happens, you've got the limit. And then Leanne had talked about the margin clause ahead of time. So 15%. So if you're insured for 10 million, the policy will play up to 11.5. All right. But we try to avoid it by always appraising and being on top of it, which has been very important in the last 5 years as costs have soared. So keeping up with that's been very important. Go ahead, Leanne.
Question.
Yep.
On topic of Safe Church Online.
Yep.
I don't know if there's either overlap or dissonance with Safe Church program that's been run in the ECCT for a long time. But is this a separate program that you have?
It's a great question. So Safe Church is really the national churches program. So years ago, 20 years ago, when it first started, you might have heard people call it Safeguarding God's Children. That was us. Church insurance agency. We put up the money. We hired the vendor, developed all the modules. In 2015, General Convention transitioned it to DFMS, so the Episcopal Church up in New York. And in 2018, they completed that transition. So what does that mean? It means that the national church publishes and manages this program. All right. They are the ones who design the model policies that say you have to do it or not, whatever it says. It's not part of our lane anymore. What's our lane? I stroke a check every month for it. So we fund it. That's the only thing we do at this point is we fund it. We wholly support it. We do feel like it protects people and vulnerable adults and children. But it's really something that's between the diocese, the church, and the national church.
Okay. That's the kind of clarification I was looking for. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah. And thanks, Paul. He's the expert on that, so I'm glad you were here to answer that.
No worries. Let's look at the
Um,
next thing. We
yeah.
got some tools.
So, yep. So what we do have many risk management sources, and from the Safety and Insurance Handbook, which is available on our website, but when I come and visit you, I will hand you one in person as well. You know, you go to cpg.org, you type in risk management in the search bar. When you get there, you can type down more, get more specific to what you're looking for, whether it's, you know, liability or, and there's hundreds of risk management tip sheets within that cpg.org website. And from, you know, outside groups using church property, bouncy houses, there's, you know, any plethora of tip sheets that are very helpful. A lot of good information in there. We have our service center, as Paul and I, you know, mentioned. You have a dedicated customer service rep. Carol Webster is the Diocese of Connecticut's dedicated service rep. If you haven't spoken with her, she's
Very nice.
very helpful. She's very responsive. They all are. Our client service reps are great. The 800 numbers right there for her. We also have a great claim center 24/7, 7 days a week. You can report a claim. And our claim center, we're known if we had a church and they left us for some reason, to go to Church Mutual or Brotherhood, and then, you know, they have a claim, they always come back to us because they just don't get the service that we provide for our clients. So, you know, what do we have? We have the Episcopal Safety Program. We reviewed that on the previous slide, but, you know, contact me for a walkthrough. Last year in the Diocese of Connecticut, I did 71. So I can do quite a few in a year. So I will, you know, when I'm in an area, I typically will reach out to other churches that are in the area. So, you know, Bill, if you contacted me, what church you're from, I'll reach out to other churches within that area, try to spend, you know, 3-4
Sure.
days down there and visit as many as I can. One-on-one meetings with me, that would be, you know, vestry meetings. I can get in front, do a high overview of the policies. I could do renewal reviews when you're up for renewal, just to make sure, you know, everybody understands when the vestry changes over or there's a new treasurer and they want me to come out, that type of thing. We have a weekly newsletter that you can get onto. I don't know, Paul, do you know that web, how they can?
It's so you go to the website, you put in an email address and they'll send it to you. It's broader than insurance. It's really all things CPG. So you'll see stuff about benefits and health insurance. And sometimes you'll see stuff about us. Generally, the deep stuff for us is the fact sheets. And when you get into those fact sheets, there's 20 or 30 of them. And I always say it like this: it's basically everything that's ever gone wrong for us. We've written a one pager on that topic and what we could do to try to avoid or prevent it. But yeah, in a nutshell, that website's a great resource. The book's a great resource. It's a downloadable PDF as well as a hard copy Leanne will give you. Folks prefer it different ways, but lots of resources out there on the website. And of course, the 800 number, we're always there. Claims is 24/7. Service center's normal business hours, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Leanne, just one question. I know my vestry wants to meet with a representative from the insurance company, especially seeing the rate increase we had this year.
Mhm.
So, how do I set that up? Do I contact you directly, and
You
what's the
contact me directly. Yes, you contact
and
me.
what's the contact number?
So I'll put it here in the chat box, but it's area code is 603
Uh-huh,
935
uh-huh.
9265. Or you can email me at, my email address is lilimoli@cpg.org.
Great. All right,
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
let's go to the next slide. And I
Yep.
want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we face collectively, you and us, because we're in this together. And we just heard a comment about, the increase in premiums. And obviously that's the one that gets our attention. That's the one that's in the news. And it is a big challenge. It's a big challenge for the church. It's a big challenge for us. So I'm going to unpack this a little bit for you if we can go back. So 3 of these things are pretty obvious. The first, the third, and the fourth. I'm going to spend a little time on them, but I really want to unpack climate change and how this is driving everything in the insurance industry right now. So declining number of churches. That's a challenge for us because we're a closed system, meaning we only insure the Episcopal Church. There's only 6,500 of them, right? Every year, we've been tracking this since 2006, we lose the equivalent of a small diocese. So 40 to 50 churches we lose to closure every year. And it's like clockwork since 06, and it escalates right now. It's up a little bit. So that's a challenge because at some point you have to have critical mass. You have to have enough insureds to have enough premium base to be able to pay claims. So it's something we keep our eye on. Deferred maintenance of church buildings. It's a big one. So what this gets into is the roof of the church had a life expectancy of 30 years. No one living remembers when it was last replaced, right? It's way beyond its born on date. There's a hailstorm. The adjuster comes out and says, yeah, it got hit by hail, but the roof was already a total because it was obsolete 20 years ago. So what happens is there's the policy, all insurance policies exclude wear and tear, right? It's not a maintenance policy. It's a sudden accidental loss policy. So this makes it very hard to adjust the claim. Ultimately, it leads to a lot of claim denials. The claim's not covered because the roof was not a whole roof anymore. It should have been replaced when, 1995. So deferred maintenance, a big deal. It's also a big deal for churches because it represents a huge piece of the budget. If you think about this, when you build a church, 40% of the total cost of owning that church is the build. That implies that 60% is maintaining it over the years. Now, the business really only tracks that for 40 years because most businesses, the building's got a life expectancy of probably about 40 years. That's not true with churches. We have churches that are hundreds of years old. Maintenance is even more of an issue with them. The slate roof is expensive to maintain, all that kind of stuff. So deferred maintenance is a big piece, a big challenge. The next challenge we have is the expansion of extension ministries. Because of declining number of churches, because of declined revenue at churches, churches are looking for other ways to drive revenue. So they get into other risks that are more risky than Sunday mass. Thrift stores, shelters, soup kitchens, preschools, things like that. So we have to evolve with the church because this is part of the church's mission. So what do? We try to figure out how do we cover these things? How do we make it as safe as possible? And we do. So those 3 are pretty straightforward. Climate change, in my estimation, by far trumps all of them. And we just heard a comment about premiums. And we're not immune to the market. So how has climate change got anything to do with insurance? So what's happened here is over the last 5 years, and it goes back, but you can really see the blip in the last 5 years. We have seen an increase in frequency and severity of weather-related events. Now, most of us would think, oh yeah, hurricanes in Florida. Not really what we're talking about, and I'll show you some detail in a minute. We're talking about convectional storm. We're talking about hail. We're talking about freeze events that start in Texas and end up in Pennsylvania. We're talking about wildfire because of drought. Climate change is driving all that. So what's happened? So when all insurance companies buy what's called reinsurance, and that's a fancy way of saying insurance for the insurance company. So there is no insurance market if there's no reinsurance market. The reinsurance market has largely gone really hard, meaning prices are up and capacity is down. Less people willing to make a bet and reinsure you. So to put that in perspective, 5 years ago, if we had a big catastrophe, our deductible was $3 million. And then above that was reinsurance, all the way up to 50 million, whatever it was. Then we had our surplus if we needed it. We never did. Today, our deductible is $10 million. So it went from 3 to 10. So what does that mean? It means, wow, we have to make sure we have enough surplus, which is a fancy way of saying rainy day money, pun intended, to pay these claims when they happen. Reinsurance says, listen, there's other ways to make money. I'm getting out of this business. So you've seen a lot of people get out of it. Back in the day when a reinsurance market would go hard, people like Warren Buffett would rush in with capital because there was money to be made. You're not seeing that anymore. It's hard to find it. So some of the things you'll see in the news, and let's bring it at a personal level, in your homeowner's book, your own personal insurance, homeowners, auto insurance, you're going to see, if you haven't already, and most of you have, dramatic increases in it because it's being driven by reinsurance, a lot of it by climate. So this is a thing that's very near and dear to our heart. It's something that if we look at our biggest competitor, Church Mutual, the largest insurer of churches, they take all comers, they have over 100,000 insureds. In the last 2 years, their surplus has been reduced by 42%. They had 500 million plus in the rainy day fund, and it's down to 300,000, and it took 2 years to get there. Their rating, their rated company through AM Best, is in jeopardy. If you're in the personal lines business, you realize State Farm just had to lower their rating. They're a B-rated carrier for State Farm General, which is their big homeowners part. So you can see climate change is hitting us all at home with our personal insurance. And again, church insurance, even though we're nonprofit domiciled in Vermont, we're not immune to the market factors. So I know that's a lot to unpack, but it's the thing that drives premium the most right now is associated with reinsurance, which is associated with climate change, which is a fancy way of saying increased severity, increased instances of weather-related losses. So let's unpack that a little bit, Leanne. We'll go to the next slide. Just mention again, my goal, our goal, Leanne, the company, is to balance your need and financial discipline. How do we continue to do what we've been doing for 95 years? And that's why this whole reinsurance piece is a big piece of it. So let's unpack claims a little bit to see what type of claims are driving this. And we'll go to the next slide, skip this one. This is 2023. So this is last year. These are the claims that came in on the property side by percentage. You can see most of them are convectional storm. Now, the interesting thing about 2023, we did not have a single named storm or hurricane that hit our book. Okay, we were very fortunate last year. So what we're looking at here is stuff that happens to everybody USA. Tornadoes can happen everywhere nowadays. Obviously, water, flood can happen anywhere. System breakdown, vandalism, sewer backup, freezing. But as you can see, all of these things are somehow correlated to weather events. Now, no name storm. What is this? This is hail the size of a baseball in North Carolina, where maybe you've seen that in Texas once or twice, but not every year the way we're seeing it now. So if you look at places like Texas, what we call the hail belt, you get into Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, the response from the industry is they're starting to raise deductibles on things like roofs. And I think in the future, you're going to see that continue. We've been able so far to hold the line on that, but we're not immune to it. So there's always going to be a trade-off. Do I want to pay the premium to get the new roof? Or do I want to save the premium and self-insure the roof? And that's really the questions that are being asked to all of us as consumers of personal lines, homeowners, or as for institutions with commercial lines like this, like churches. But what's really striking to me about this is that absent of hurricane, this is what it looked like. So again, none of us are immune to it. These are things that happen nationwide. It used to be, you could draw a line up and down the coast from Maine to Galveston, Texas, and go, yeah, 38% of Episcopal churches within 10 miles of the ocean. That's where the action is. But what we've seen last year demonstrated it very well. Had a very quiet year on the coast. That the heartland, the 48 states got hammered. We'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about liability claims. Now, by and large, property claims are everything. That's what everybody has nonstop. Act of God can't stop it. Losses for liability, we don't have as many of them, but when we have them, they tend to be doozies. You can get into the wrongful death. Kid eats a peanut who wasn't supposed to, on the church's watch. You get into sexual misconduct. You get into directors, officers, and EPL. By the way, plug for y'all. The most important coverage for anybody in leadership at a church today is directors, officers, employment practices, liability. Why? It comes home to roost with you personally. If you don't have this coverage, it comes home to, and it's excluded on your homeowners, so you end up protecting it with your assets. You don't want to be there. So again, we will not issue a policy without D&O coverage, without EPL coverage, most important coverage to you. We don't have a lot of it. What we have a lot of, we don't have a lot of D&O, meaning the vestry did something they shouldn't have done, or they shouldn't have done something that they did do. We don't have a lot of that. We have a lot of EPL, typically wrongful termination. We terminate someone, there's no file, there's no HR, there's no written review, there's no verbal warning, there's no written warning, there's nothing. There's nothing. We get about 25 or 30 of those a year, wrongful term. That's the big thing. And like I said, without this coverage, it would come home to roost personally with the leadership on the vestry and the rector and the organization. And we'll go ahead and move along. All right. So Leanne, you want to do the takeaways, and then we still have a little bit of time for any additional questions.
Yeah, quick wrap up of the takeaways is, we've touched on providing the coverage, broad coverage for property and casualty, as outlined in our package, property liability, D&O, excess liability, auto employment practices. We provide a variety of risk management services from our safety inspections, our Safe Church online, and loss control walkthroughs. And then when tragedy strikes, we work hard to get you back on your feet with our claim department. Very effective. Kudos to them. They have a lot of accolades if you ever need them. We try to settle our claims that are under $10,000 within days of receiving without even sending out an adjuster. And our goal is to streamline the remediation process to ensure that your organization is able to return to pre-loss condition as quickly as possible. We also have a great customer service department where we offer nationwide customer service program 24/7. And our billing department available as well. They will work with any church that's struggling to get that premium paid. And that's us in a nutshell.
And then let's show them the last page. Brian, you'll like this last page. So there's the word from our attorneys, which is something, anyway, I always just joke with that. One thing Leanne said about claims that I didn't point out that's super important, and it's unheard of. Because if you think about most people, when you have a claim, your experience isn't usually that great. We survey all our claimants after the claim. How did it go? What could we have done better? What's our grade? They score 95% almost every year. Last year, it dipped to 93%. Now it's up to 98%. It's usually about 95%. Industry standard, if you're 80, you've given yourself a pat on the back. So again, this is showing me and you, it's demonstrating that this self-insured captive model is working as designed. It's designed to provide broad property and casualty coverage in a financially responsible way, and it's doing that. So any additional questions, we can open it up. We wore them out, Leanne.
We did.
Yeah, it's been a feast. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, very thorough, thank you. And Leanne, I'll send you an email about getting
Yes.
some future date set up for us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, if there's nothing
Um,
else, we'll give you back 7 minutes to your busy day. Steve, Susie, have anything?
No, thank you very much. A great presentation, and I really enjoyed this transition back to church insurance. It's been a boon for us, for me anyway. Just the response that I get from a phone call is amazing.
We answer the phone.
I will say too,
right.
so I saw 71 churches last year, as I mentioned, and every one of them, they're thrilled to have a hands-on approach to their insurance where they can call somebody up and ask about it and get an answer. So it's been nothing but positive. I love it. So
There's a
happy
reason.
to service you all.
I always say it
Okay.
like this. There's a reason why the Episcopal Church through Church Pension Group owns an insurance company. There's a good reason. Okay. So we're glad you're back. We hope you stay forever. Leanne's going to do everything she can to make that happen.
Mhm.
Anytime you have a good experience or a bad experience, please let her know.
Yeah.
We're always looking to improve, and we always want to listen to our client. One of the keys to our success is that we listen. We answer phones and we listen. So keep us honest, and I know you will. We'll let you all go.
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
Thank
Leanne. See
you.
y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.